apologize for the bit of an absence or hiatus or whatever you want to call it in between videos. But I know it has been a little bit. There have been a few things that have gone on in the past week. So just some general updates on the channel and just kind of where I intend to take things from here. But I'm now a graduate from the University of Missouri in sociology. Just graduated this weekend. Didn't walk the stage, but did what I had to do. And I will be getting my degree in the mail in 3 months. So that is certainly good to be finished with that, and definitely a step forward. So I'm back home for now. I'm currently in Lockport, Illinois, and take a look at everything that's going on. This will be where I'll be doing my videos for the most part. But I know there's a lot to update on since my last video, which is when we were still in the second round. Of course, second round was pretty brief for all 4 series. One of them was a sweep. The other 3 only lasted 5 games. And I don't think any of the outcomes in the West certainly were not surprising, but in the Eastern Conference, that's where there was a bit more of a surprise. I know I talked a little bit earlier in the series between the Cavs and the Raptors about what Toronto was really missing in that series, and then, of course, going on to how Boston was able to dispatch the Sixers in 5 games, is taking advantage of some of the late turnovers that they had in a lot of those games, out coaching them in a lot of situations, is kind of what we saw out of Brad Stevens in that battle with Brett Brown. But I think we've seen a lot more of that in the first 2 games of this conference final series, which will be the first thing I talk about. And, as everybody knows, I'm a Celtics fan. It's been a very exciting year, a lot of success that I certainly didn't anticipate or expect. And I certainly didn't expect them to be leading 2-0 going into the series. I thought that the series would be a really good series. My initial prediction was that the Cavaliers would win in 6. I expected Boston to win 2 of the first 3 games and then for Cleveland to win 3 in a row, but Boston protected home floor. They're 9-0 on their home floor during the playoffs this season, which is incredibly important and also very impressive to continually to be able to put pressure on the team you're playing, since they've had home court in every series. That just puts a tremendous amount of pressure on the team that's going back home. And you look in the situation, the Milwaukee Bucks, they were able to defend their home court throughout that series. But Philadelphia, who lost Game 3, that was one of the more riveting games I've seen in recent memory between the Celtics and the Sixers. And while Philadelphia was able to win Game 4, that series was over in 5 games. And granted, this cannot be treated like any other series because you're facing LeBron James. And I think that that's the number one thing that has to be addressed. So for me, the Celtics being 37-0 in series when they've been leading 2-0, that's just irrelevant. You're playing arguably the greatest player of all time, certainly the greatest player of this generation. And I think last night there was a lot of criticism that he faced, of course, after Game 1, where he had 15 points, looked lethargic, was not as aggressive offensively as we've seen LeBron James this postseason, to where, he has to be the guy that completely takes control from a scoring standpoint to be able to, keep the Cavs in games. And that's certainly something that they needed. And last night he came through and gave that 21 points in the first quarter. He also had 21 for the rest of the game. But, having one of the best quarters that we've seen LeBron James have in his playoff career. And I think that goes back to the press conference that Brad Stevens had after Game 1, where he said, no matter what happens, we're expecting a knockout punch. We're expecting a lot of aggression from LeBron James. And that's what they got. He finished a game last night with 42 points, 10 rebounds, and 12 assists. And I think it just really speaks to the difficulties that his team is going through when that is the line that you get from LeBron James, and yet you lose by 13 points in a game that you really felt that you had to win for the most part. So those are certainly some big things that are going to have to be looked at if you're the Cleveland Cavaliers, because if you get a 40-point triple-double from LeBron James, including a 21-point quarter to start the game, that's what set the tone for the game. And I think you have to give a lot of credit to Boston for being able to kind of offset what Cleveland was bringing to the table those first 12 minutes, to still be in the game after the first quarter and then to pull away in the second half, where Cleveland, having the first half that they had and were only up by 7 at halftime. That kind of told the story of what could happen in the second half, considering that Cleveland probably should have been up by a lot more at that period of time, because they did outplay the Celtics in the first half of that game last night. But when you get a 42-point triple-double from LeBron James, when you get a 22-point double-double from Kevin Love, and you're losing by 13, there's a major issue. There needs to be something that has to be figured out. And I think when you're looking at Tyronn Lue, who I don't think is a bad coach, I never really considered him to be among the echelon of the best coaches in the league, but I think he knows what he's doing. I mean, this is somebody that has won a championship, has managed playoff series very well before, but this is a different animal. And it's not that, LeBron James is being outmatched in this series. The matter of the fact is that when you look at the Boston Celtics, they're the first team that the Cavs have faced in the playoffs, arguably since LeBron has been in Cleveland, that simply has the size to match up with him. And at that point, it's not even about getting guys that are the best defenders, even though Boston has a lot of outstanding defenders, and we've seen that so far on LeBron James in the series. But I think it becomes much more of a matter of just having the size to put bodies on him. They had 9 different players guarding LeBron James last night. And usually you see the rotation of around 4 or 5. It's a lot of Al Horford, a lot of Marcus Morris, a lot of Jaylen Brown, a lot of Jason Tatum, and a little bit of Marcus Smart. But the thing with all of those players is that not only are they apt defenders because of their size, their athleticism, and their speed, but they're no offensive liability. In fact, most of those guys are better offensive players than they are defensive players. So Boston isn't losing anything on the floor when they're able to optimize their matchups against LeBron James or Kevin Love. We've seen Al Horford guard Kevin Love at times. We saw Semi Ojeleye come off the bench and guard LeBron James for a little bit. We saw a little bit of Greg Monroe, who has been absent for the most part for these past 2 series, coming in and guarding LeBron James. And then you flip to the other side of the floor. It's not like you're losing any production from Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum or even Marcus Smart, who, when he's not scoring, is playing a huge role offensively by being one of the better facilitators on the team. So it just leaves Cleveland's hands full in so many ways, because even when you're getting everything from LeBron James and the other all-star you have on your team, they're getting absolutely nothing from anybody else. And I mean, Kyle Korver had 11 points last night. Tristan Thompson had a few big rebounds. But when you're looking at George Hill and J.R. Smith combining for 3 points, when you have the backcourt of the Celtics with Terry Rozier and Jaylen Brown combining for 41 points, that the proof is in the pudding right there, that Cleveland needs contributions from those outside pieces. And I think specifically in the context of J.R. Smith, who the last 3 postseasons has been absolutely integral, and I think overlooked to an extent, to the Cavaliers' success of being able to make it to the finals 3 straight years and winning the finals in 2016. I think that J.R. Smith was a huge part of that success. And I think, you look at last year, where he was injured most of the year, comes into the postseason, shoots 50% from beyond the arc. And that's something that is a huge difference maker. He was not missing in the playoffs last year. And you compare that to what he's been giving Cleveland this year. He went from shooting 50% in the playoffs. Last year, he shot 43% from 3-point territory in the playoffs in 2016. And just comparing them, last year he shot a little over 50% from the field. This year he's at 37% from the field. Last year, shot 50% from 3. This year, 36.8%. And while he's averaging more points a game this postseason, he's also averaging 4.5 more minutes. So he's getting more playing time, and he's giving the Cavaliers less efficient shooting. He hasn't been able to contribute in that same way. He's been pretty solid defensively at times, but they need him to score. And you can't have J.R. Smith playing 24, 25, 26 minutes and not putting up any points. That will allow you to lose a lot of games. So when this series shifts back to Cleveland, I certainly expect a similar performance from LeBron James. But the X factor in this series is going to be, what's George Hill going to give you? What is J.R. Smith going to give you? Are you going to get anything for Jordan Clarkson off the bench or Larry Nance? They need these contributions because, you look at this team, and it is, I think, without a doubt, the least talented team that LeBron James has had to deal with since 2007 when he took that team. And when I say that 2007 team was incredible defensively, especially looking at what Zydrunas Ilgauskas, who was at the time one of the best defensive big men in the league. Can't forget about Eric Snow and what he was able to bring to the table for that team. They were really strong defensively, and that was certainly a big reason as to why they were able to get to the finals, despite the fact that offensively they were, they were rough. And I mean, granted, this is a different era of the NBA, but, this is in a time to where things were just completely different. And that was a team that, and not the 07-08, the 2006-07 Cavaliers. That was a team that averaged 96.8 points a game. And they were fifth in opponents' points per game, fourth in defensive rating that year. That's not the case this year. This year, they were 29th in defensive efficiency throughout the year. So I think when you're considering that and knowing that that has been such a primary weakness of the Cavaliers throughout the season, they are really, really going to need not only a superhuman performance from LeBron James, which they got last night, mind you, they are going to need an all-star performance from Kevin Love. They're going to need J.R. Smith and Kyle Korver to probably each score in double digits. They're going to need Rodney Hood to wake up. They're going to need big contributions from 5 or 6 different guys to be able to win. And I think the Celtics are having a blast with this matchup because they are facing a lot of one-dimensional players. And I think when you get to the other side of the floor where the Cavaliers are just they're not just unable defensively, but I think a lot of times, and it became very apparent last night and at other times in this postseason as well, that there's just been a general lack of effort with the Cavaliers. And I really do think that defense has a lot to do with effort. It has a lot to do with neutralizing your ego. It has a lot to do with buying into the team. And I just don't think that the Cavaliers have ever figured that out this year. There's been a common criticism of them throughout the year that they are not a team, that they are a collection of individuals, and that after that big trade, that maybe that was going to change, injecting a lot of young talent into that lineup. But they are still vastly outnumbered talent-wise by the Boston Celtics, who have a lot of top-line talent on this team. Even without Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward, you still have 3 top 10 picks. Actually 4 top 10 picks. Forgot about Al Horford in that equation. And then, you look at Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, were both 3rd overall picks in back-to-back years in 2016, 2017. So, even without their superstars, they're still in an excellent position. I don't think the series is over, but I do think that the Cavaliers are going to have to win both games at home in order to stay in the series. Because, if they split and, you go back to Boston with the Celtics leading 3-1, you can't put anything out of the capability of LeBron James. But this is a very, very difficult series for him. And it's now starting to look like the chances of him not making it to the finals for an 8th straight year are starting to become very real as they trail 2-0 in the Eastern Conference Final. We have Game 2 of the Western Conference Final tonight, and I don't think there could be any more. I think if the Rockets don't win tonight, it's going to be a sweep. And I'm not particularly surprised by the results that we saw in Game 1. I think the biggest reason for that, and it's kind of been something that I've noticed throughout the year, is that the Houston Rockets, while they are one of the most offensively dynamic teams that we've seen in the league's history, don't really do much to make the Golden State Warriors uncomfortable in any way. And that's where you start to see the issues when they're playing a Warriors team, to where if the Rockets aren't hitting shots, they're probably going to lose, at least to a team like the Warriors, or if they're playing a different team, would at least give that team a shot to stay in it if they're not hitting shots because of the way that they play. And we saw a lot of isolation ball in that Game 1. They need to move the ball more if they're going to have a chance against the Golden State Warriors. But they don't really do anything to take the Warriors out of their rhythm. Defensively, they're just ready to defend the 3 and make sure that they have a good chance to defend the rim, with Clint Capella being one of the better rim protectors in the league. But they don't really force the Warriors to get out of rhythm. And the Warriors are simply so much more versatile offensively, to where if they're not hitting their shots, which they are just more likely to be hitting their shots, considering that they have arguably 3 of the top 5 shooters to have ever lived on their team, if they happen to not be hitting their shots, they will find other ways to win the game. They will move the ball better. They can put up 30 assists. They can create high percentage shots. And that's where you start to see more of guys like David West and Sean Livingston and JaVale McGee, where they start to run a lot of back cuts. And that is where the Warriors can strike very effectively and very quickly. And that is something that the Houston Rockets do not have an answer to. I think that in a potential finals matchup with either the Celtics or the Cavaliers, I think the Warriors would be given much trouble because at least the matchup of LeBron James gives you something and makes you uncomfortable. And for the Celtics, they have the bodies and the three-point defense and the athleticism to be able to, at the very least, take the Warriors a little bit out of the rhythm. But the Rockets don't have that kind of athleticism or speed on that team. There's a lot of very good shooters, albeit a lot of them are streaky. But I mean, when you think about having the bodies to be able to match up against Klay Thompson, against Kevin Durant, against Stephen Curry, those matchups are ones that often don't favor the Houston Rockets. And while they do have some excellent defenders, PJ Tucker, I think, is an all-NBA defender, has been outstanding all year. I've definitely gone at length expressing how Clint Capella and his presence has made the system that the Rockets play impossible at all. But I just think that the Warriors are too much. And if they win tonight, I think that this can definitely be a sweep. I hope it's a good series. I hope it's still the riveting series that we've wanted and have kind of been waiting for all year. But I think that there's a decent chance at this Celtics-Cavs series, if that gets evened up, that can end up being a real classic. But Boston, of course, looking to take the 3-0 lead in that. And if Golden State goes up 2-0 on the road, heading back to Oracle Arena in the playoffs, which is just a place that is very, very tough to win. I mean, I think when you look at the Steve Kerr era and who has been able to win at the Oracle Arena, as far as Western Conference teams, you're looking at slim pickings. The Memphis Grizzlies in 2015 beat them on the road once. In 2016, they did not lose. Oklahoma City was able to beat them once on their home floor in that conference final series. In last year, they did not lose at home. And this year, they have not lost at home yet. So, when you're looking at the Western Conference and looking at the last 4 years, with them making it to the finals each of the last 3 years, but looking at the Steve Kerr era and seeing the Western Conference team has beaten the Warriors twice overall, and not in a series, there's 2 games in the past 4 years. I think that just kind of shows the tale how dominant the Warriors are on their own floor. And I don't think that that's an atmosphere that the Houston Rockets would bode well in heading back there if they're down 2-0. And really, I mean, a split isn't ideal. They really would have wanted to win both of these first 2 games. But now this is where you have to win tonight. And if not, I really think that that's a nail in the coffin for the Houston Rockets if they're not able to win tonight. One other big thing, I know I haven't talked about baseball a lot, which is something I certainly intend to do more once basketball ends. I just kind of want to give as most in-depth analysis that I can about what's going on in the NBA right now. But of course, big news in the MLB yesterday. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Hall of Fame implications behind it, because this is certainly a subject that I find very interesting, especially because it's evolved a lot in the past couple of years. But Robinson Cano testing positive for a banned substance. He'll be suspended 80 games this year. He's ineligible for the postseason. And this is a guy to where, I mean, maybe your casual sports fan will be unaware of this, but Robinson Cano is a Hall of Famer. This is an individual that has been absolutely dominant throughout his career. And I think when you look at what he's brought to the table, even in his time in Seattle, he's been incredible. He's a career .304 hitter as a second baseman, approaching 4,000 total bases. He's over 300 career homers, over 1,200 career RBIs, over 2,400 career hits, over 1,100 career runs. And this is somebody that has shown this ability the second he came into the league. His second year in the league, he finished 22nd in MVP voting and hit .342 for the Yankees across 122 games. He's finished top 5 in the MVP voting 4 times in his career. He's finished top 10 6 times, and he's been an all-star 8 times. So this is somebody that has been a generational talent, especially adjusting to what he's been able to bring to the position. In his career, he already has 67.5 wins above replacement, which is in the Hall of Fame range. And, you look at his numbers, and to me, that's a no-brainer, especially considering that he's arguably the best offensive second baseman of this generation. I think Chase Utley perhaps is maybe more dominant at the peak of his career. But if you're looking at consistency and sustained dominance, Robinson Cano would have to be it as far as the best second baseman. Of course, Dustin Pedroia is up there. But this is a player that has been extremely entertaining to watch throughout his career. And at 35 years old, he gets hit with a PED suspension. And the substance that he was banned for was a diuretic that he was given by a physician in the Dominican Republic that claimed would help him recover from some ailments that he had. I don't know exactly what the details were to that, but it was a banned substance, not explicitly a PED. But was something that was on the banned substance list. And when you are an athlete, especially in the MLB, that has a very long list of these substances, you can't just go into GNC and take anything you see or take anything a physician gives you. And that is part of your responsibility to be aware of what you were taking. But in the context of whether this will affect his Hall of Fame induction or not, I'm not sure. I think that a lot of baseball fans are kind of warming up to the idea of letting some of these players that have either tested positive or been widely accused of using steroids, or I guess reliably accused would be the better word, of using steroids, and that they've been let out of the Hall of Fame. And I think, to me, I try and assess it on a case-to-case basis. For example, I like Roger Clemens is one that's always really tough, but I personally don't believe he should be a Hall of Famer, because if you look at his numbers, he was having several subpar seasons in the mid-1990s as he was approaching his 30s at the end of his tenure with the Red Sox. And it looked to be as if his career was in decline. And then all of a sudden he goes to the Blue Jays in 97, wins a couple of Cy Youngs, and then is dominant for another decade. That just doesn't add up to me. And his HGH use, as at least noted in the Mitchell report, started in 1997. So to me, his performance-enhancing drug usage made the difference between him being a Hall of Famer and him not being a Hall of Famer. But if you look at Barry Bonds or Alex Rodriguez, I'm not really convinced that, minus steroids, that they're not Hall of Famers. Especially Barry Bonds, who was a Hall of Famer before he took steroids. I mean, I think if you look at the first half of his career and what he was able to do, I think there's very little argument, steroids or not, to say that Barry Bonds and Alex Rodriguez are two of the greatest players of all time. And I think if you remove steroids from the equation, you can make an argument that they're the greatest. I think you look at what Alex Rodriguez brought to the table in 1996 at the age of 20, hit .336, and arguably had the best offensive season of a shortstop ever. These are really impressive things that we've seen. That was when Alex Rodriguez, when it was in Seattle, and long before, he ever tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs or admitted to the usage of it. So I think it has to be something that's assessed on a case-to-case basis. But if Robinson Cano is robbed of the Hall of Fame because of taking a diuretic that, really it's not an anabolic steroid, no, I'm not down with that idea. I think it would be pretty preposterous if Robinson Cano did not make it to the Hall of Fame because of this suspension. I think that he is, without a doubt, one of the greatest hitters we have seen in this generation, period. And then when you add to the fact that he's a second baseman and has been able to do that at that position for so long, I just think it really speaks to how incredible of a player he has been. And I do not hold this suspension against him when assessing whether he's a Hall of Famer or not. And honestly, I think it'd be pretty ridiculous to do so, because this has been somebody, I mean, granted, something came out that he has been using performance-enhancing drugs his whole career. That is a different story. But I really do think that he has been so dominant and so great throughout his career. And on top of the fact that the substance, while on the banned substance list, isn't one that would really make a difference, especially because he tested positive for this in the offseason. I really don't think that there's a very legitimate case for using this as justification for Robinson Cano not being a Hall of Famer. But that's pretty much my thoughts on it. That's pretty much all I have for today as well. Thank you everybody for tuning in to the 34th episode of Pick and Pop. Now that I am moved back here, I will start. I know I've teased this for around a month. I will start doing album reviews potentially as soon as tomorrow. I'll look to start uploading some, and I think, as I mentioned in the past, I'll be looking to do retrospective reviews. Not really old music, but music that's mostly come out within my lifetime, and kind of review it and rate it based on its retrospective impact and kind of what we've seen from the music since. So that'll definitely be something that I'll look to start doing. And I'll also look to review artists by starting at the top of their discography and then moving to their more recent work. So that's kind of a more unique aspect that I want to bring to that. But I'll edit and adjust my channel to keep like the sports material and that material separate, but I will include them on the same channel. And I hope that'll be something that is of interest to people. So that'll be really exciting. I'm definitely excited to get started on that. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you for tuning in. Hope everybody has a great rest of their Wednesday morning. Have a good night.